Hey, can everybody hear me? I can hear me, so I'm guessing that means everybody else can too. Awesome, thank you. Just a little housekeeping stuff. This is the first time I've done this talk, so any feedback later would be appreciated. Also, my personal record so far in practice is 2.5 hours. So everybody buckle up and let's get going. All right, I'm going to talk about the UX of AI. To do that, we need to talk a little bit about what is user interface. So I think when I say user interface, most of us probably assume something like this, right? It's a screen with things on it. That's a very modern interpretation of user interface. I love this because it contrasts very well with what we had, right? This is also a user interface. Personally, I like all the materials and the analog buttons and the things like that. Those are very interesting things. But UI relates to all of these things around us, right? The chair you're sitting in, for example, has a user interface. Many auditoriums like this have chairs that fold up on you. That's a poor user interface. Anybody sitting in an elevator today? That had a user interface. Typewriters have a user interface. All of that is how we interact with these systems, right? So here's a very simple definition of what is user interface. Basically, it's the way we interact with a machine or a system. Most of us think of this as software. That's fine for our conversation today. We'll continue to think of this as software. So with that in mind, what we need to do is a history of UI. Stephen Hawking managed to do a brief history of time. I'll try to keep my UI history as brief, no promises. But let's get started. Here is a user interface for early computers. Punch cards. Anybody use a punch card? That's very impressive, and I'm glad I can see you up there. We'll have conversations later about how great that experience was. There's some pros and cons to punch cards, right? They actually work very much the way computers think. So when you learn how to use a punch card, your ability to program with that is actually close to what's going on. However, they're very time-consuming to create. People who raised their hands, I'm guessing you would not like to go back because of the limited scope and the number of cards you had to use and things like that. They're also not very changeable. Right? If I mess up, it's really hard to go back and undo that piece and change it. So we all got together and we said, hey, what if we could use text to interact with the computer? I love these old ads. They're super fun. Only $1,600 for 16K of RAM. But text UI has some pros and cons as well. It's kind of fast because we can type quickly. It uses sort of human language, right? I understand words like run and go and do these things. And it's pretty powerful. We can chain commands together. We can get a lot out of it. We still use these today, right? Your terminal prompt is this. But they've got drawbacks too, right? It's kind of hard to remember what you're supposed to do with it. It's almost impossible to know what you could do, right? Unless you read the manual over and over and over and you memorized a lot of things. And they create this process in us that is very linear, right? We think about do this, then do this, then do this. So yet again, as technologists, we all got together and we said, what if we could do something else? We said, what if we could do something else? And our answer was put text on the screen with navigation, right? Guided text UI. That's great. Bulletin boards from the 90s, super fun. But it's kind of limited in a lot of the same ways. So Apple comes along. Very famous story about Steve Jobs going to the Xerox Innovation Lab and learning all about the mouse, right? Got a pointing device. And that allows for graphical user interface. This is basically what we're thinking of every time we interact with a tablet, modern operating system, whatever. Take your pick. That is probably a graphical user interface. I do love that Apple's sales pitch here is for the computer for the bemused, confused, and intimidated, right? We're taking this text input and we're saying, hey, there's a better way to do this. We're going to use a GUI. That comes with some drawbacks. I don't know. I think I just had a brain aneurysm trying to figure out what's going on here. This is Maya, Autodesk Maya. It's a 3D application. Weirdly, for whatever reason, most 3D applications end up working like this. Blender, all of them have so much interaction, right? So we've got kind of these pros and cons of a graphical user interface, again. You don't have to memorize how to do things, for the most part, right? You click on something and away you go and you find it. That also gives us powerful tools for very complex workflows, as we just saw for Autodesk. It mimics analog interfaces, right? I know what a button does. You click a button and things happen. And it looks, well, except for that example, it looks easy. But pictures mean different things to different people, right? Culturally, we have a lot of issues with that. Organization is extremely complicated. How do I put the pictures that mean the same thing together, except for when they don't mean the same thing? And then, obviously, there's limited screen space, as we just saw, and it can be kind of slow and distracting. We thought, well, maybe we can kind of change this by making explorative interfaces. Anybody else play with the Google I/O adventure? These are kind of fun, right? But I don't really know what I can do. Kind of got some of the same problems. Also, they are very distracting. So what did we do? We all got together and we decided to change the interface paradigm yet again. How about contextual UI? Contextual UI, in theory, is really cool. I put the information that I need on the screen or in front of me or around me when I need it. Sounds great, right? AR, VR, most of this stuff is happening in those spaces. It's cool because it doesn't take a lot of energy, like mental energy, to think through this. The information I need is right there when I need it. It also combines physical spaces that we're very used to as humans with information about things. We like that. But again, there's some cons. Contextual interfaces are very complex and hard to produce, right? They take special hardware, they take special programming interfaces, and worse, somebody somewhere has to define what all the triggers are. So what event causes things to show up for you? Depending on your application, that could be a lot of things, right? And a lot of complicated things. So we took another step. Anybody following this so far? We just keep doing these things. Sometimes the pros and cons are the same. So we created voice conversational UI, sometimes called ambient UI, which means that it's around me, right? It's the voice that you hear. Great, right? I can talk to a thing when I'm driving. I can get recipe help while I'm cutting things and not lose my fingers. Great, I love it. But at the same time, even though it understands what I say, it gets the intent out of a big, broad group of ideas, the interactions are slow, right? Talking is not as fast as reading or typing. And then we have a lot of the same problems we had before. What can it do? Man, I don't know. Maybe it'll tell me. It can misinterpret what I want it to do, right? What's weird here is this is very similar to what we had with text UI, right? We're going in a circle. So what that brings us to is, in 2024, what is the typical way of interacting with AI? I'm guessing you know. What's the similarity there? One giant box that says type something or say something. I don't think that's ideal. What we've done is we've created prompts. Tell me all about all the things I need to do. I do think it's funny that multiple definitions of prompt don't necessarily match, because prompt is not always prompt. Okay, so here's an example of how to write a good prompt. Show of hands in here, I can see some of you, sorry. How many of you would consider yourselves good prompt writers? A few, okay. How many of you would consider your parents or your neighbors good prompt writers? Well, you're laughing. I mean, come on. This is how we engage with AI. Okay. This is kind of where we're going, right? We've created an entire career path called prompt engineer because prompting is kind of weird. Why is prompting kind of weird? Let's talk about some reasons, okay? We're going to get into the problems with creating a prompt. First one, I as a human don't usually have questions, okay? I have goals. I want to do a thing, right? I want to go on vacation. I want to find inefficiencies in my business. I want to do a thing. Prompts are focused around questions, right? How can I get it to do this? How can I find the efficiency? Where would I go on vacation? 2, humans are really bad at asking for what we want. Show of hands, all of you deserve it. Who's asked for a raise recently? Who walked into their manager's office and said, me, today's the day, hook me up? If you said yes, pat yourself on the back because that is not happening a lot, okay? Humans are really bad at this. I'm going to give you some examples. I turned 16 in the 90s. It was great. I went and I got my driver's license. And I said, hey, Mom and Dad, can I get a car? Great question, right? Well, something you need to know about the 90s. This is what car culture was like in the 90s. Okay, I might have had that poster, the Ferrari F40, that might have been on my wall, right? Further, you could go into most stores and find plastic models of all kinds of different cars. Now, we needed these as elementary and junior high kids because we didn't have a phone to look at. What else were we going to do other than build a plastic model and wonder what kind of car we were going to get? Okay, so this context, it's like, Mom and Dad, can I have a car? Now, I wasn't expecting a Ferrari, maybe a Porsche, hopefully a Jeep Wrangler, maybe a muscle car, right? Anybody remember the K car? I did not get one of these. Lucky me, right? All of your identity is wrapped up in the car you drive. So I didn't get that. I got the K car's slower, more boring sibling, the Chrysler New Yorker. Now, if any of you thought, wow, I just saw my grandparents' house with wheels on it, that's it right there. That is the thing. This car was not without some benefits. One of the cool things about it is that this was a talking car. 1984, there were talking cars. Now, I know you're all thinking Kit from Knight Rider. That was not what happened, okay? Let me tell you, when it said something like the lights are on, that really meant your doors are open. Sure, that tracks. Your windshield wipers are going. Well, that means your lights are on. Okay. My favorite, you're low on fuel. actually meant you're out of fuel, and sorry, don't even try. Okay. I was not great at asking for what I wanted. As humans, we just don't do that. Like that's not how we function. There's so much implied in what we want. And the problem with that is that there's a lot of things that are not said. So I have a conversation with any of you, and I use the context of where we are, what we're doing, what we've been talking about, any background in history. Those are really hard things to communicate in a prompt, right? If I say to you it's bright outside, you've got a pretty good idea what I'm talking about, right? You might recommend that I bring sunglasses. What do you think the AI hears when you say it's bright outside? Are you in the middle of nuclear Armageddon? I don't know, right? There's a lot that could be going on there, and we don't say those things. So add to that the fact that humans are not exactly detail-oriented. What do I mean by that? Well, I had breakfast this morning at a very nice little cafe that I don't remember the name of. It's in my notes. Sidewalk Citizen Bakery. If nobody's tried it, it's great. It's a couple blocks away. But I thought, well, maybe if I describe to Imagine 3 what my breakfast was, like I could get a picture of it for all of you to see. Should we do it? I had a breakfast sandwich. Make a picture of one with bacon and egg. Sounds good. But you know what? That does not look like what I ate this morning. Tried again. Said, well, maybe if I use the information from the menu itself, I will get a better picture of what I had for breakfast. I mean, the menu is describing it, right? That's what I got. Still not what I had for breakfast. It's closer. My picture wasn't as good, right? It's maybe not as appetizing to see the real thing. But we lack this level of detail when we try to create prompts. So we don't always get what we want. And then let's just add to the fact that humans really talk funny. Boot. There's a few different meanings. They matter. And humans have slang, we have accents, we have shared history. All of that stuff goes into the way that we don't ask questions. And that turns AI into this. Anybody know the story of the monkey's paw? Basically, you get 3 wishes. It's up to the monkey's paw how it fulfills those. So, the guy asks for more money. The monkey's paw causes his son to get into a car accident, or an accident of some kind, I don't remember what it was, and get money from that, right? So the son dies, and now I get money. So they wish for the son to come back. Obviously, right? There's loud noises and scratching at the door, and they think there's a monster outside. Like the son has been reanimated as some creature of the night. So their last wish is that they wish for all of that to go away, right? No solution has happened in any of this. But we are turning AI into these things, right? We get these unintended consequences when we use prompts. Okay. Where did we get this? I submit to you that we have 50 years of science fiction that has told us exactly how you are supposed to interact with AI. Most of the AI wants to kill me. Okay, that's fine. There's a few of them, though, like Jarvis, where I'm like, hey, that'd be pretty awesome. If only I could prompt my AI that way. Unfortunately, we can't really do that. We can do a little better, though. I'm not knocking on all AI tools. On the left is Adobe's Firefly. It still has a prompt area, but it has some ways to help me do better with my prompts. Notebook LM has some kind of cool, here are things you might want to do with this information. Okay, pretty good, but maybe not ideal. Here are the 3 things that I believe that we can do right now, today, to build tools that utilize AI that work better for your parents, for your neighbor, or for you, if you were looping yourself in with that, who don't want to write prompts all the time. Let's start with the first one, fully hidden. We have all these tools. I like Cursor. Google's IDX has some really cool stuff built into it. They all have the same problem. They say, what do you want me to do? What if we built a tool that watched me code and said, hey, that's a race condition. Don't do that. Right? That's way more useful than me asking, you know, I wrote this great code, but could you poke holes in it? I mean, it's mine. I like it. That's what we're doing, though, with these tools. So can the tool be engaged with us and give us kind of a push instead of a pull? That's one. Second one, here's an example. Let's build a, let's assume that as an American citizen, for absolutely no reason, I have recently decided I'd like to move to Canada. You're laughing. There's no reason, I'm telling you. But I don't know a lot about the places in Canada that I can move to. Well, what if I ask a series of questions? Like, what is the size of your family? What do you like to do in your free time? What's important to you? And I build a prompt behind the scenes based on these things to tell me this about Calgary. That checked a lot of boxes right there. I doubt that had I asked Gemini or ChatGPT to tell me where my lifestyle might fit, that it would have given me that information on its own, right? This is the prompt that I used to create that text based on the UI we just saw. Here's another one. Anybody remember Johnny 5? The robot that's always in love? Well, my wife, not exactly a Johnny 5 fan, but you know what? She does actually like date night every once in a while. I could put this into Gemini. I'll get something out of it. Not quite sure what I'll get. Probably isn't going to help me all that much. So what if instead we created an interface that got rid of all this, helped me be a better partner, and asked me all the details that I wouldn't have known on my own? Here's what's cool about this. We look at these things and we're like, well, it's kind of locked in and you can't do much with it. But what if you could? Right? We're talking about AI. What if the options could be generated on the fly based on what you know about me? This lets me create a really powerful prompt behind the scenes. Multi-step, chain of thought. Do things with things you know, right? I want random type of food. Well, go find a list of random types of food first, and then pick from that for me. The idea here is that you get a lot more power without sacrificing the usability for a prompt. Right? There is a catch. There's a catch with everything. It's unfortunate. We know that AI hallucinates. That was Gemini hallucinating. But we can mess with our prompts in such a way that we can mitigate this a little bit. Now, I want to be very clear. If we're hiding all the prompting and all that kind of stuff from the user, we have to be very careful about what comes back. Because if we're not, we degrade trust. Okay? I don't know why this thing is giving me something weird because I didn't put anything weird in it. So that yellow text at the bottom, this is my prompt from before. We like to rely on, like we got to this point where like AI did it all. But don't think of those things as a standalone be-all, do-everything tool. In this case, we're going to ask that the results include a real business name, a street address, and preferably a URL. Now, if I have a street address and a business name, Google Places API, right? I can test it real quick and find out if that is an actual real thing that I should show to the user. Same thing with all of the URL for information, right? Like I can test this and make sure that something actually comes back from the URL, right? I don't necessarily know if it's quite correct, but I can tell you that it's not made up because it doesn't 404. Make sense? Okay. Usually people end their talks with questions. I say no. Instead, let's go build applications that do a better job, right? Let's do things that get the users more of what they need. And if you do that, I think we'll be very successful with AI as we go forward. Anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can. Otherwise, I will leave you with, well, Jim and I thanking you for being here. Thank you.